Wanted to do something on surprising, transforming initiative in deference to one of my ethics professors, Glenn Stassen. I read from Matthew 5:38 through 45. Jesus said, "You have heard it said of old, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other one also. And if anyone sues you to take your coat, give your cloak as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go a second, and give to everyone who begs. Do not refuse people who want to borrow from you. You've heard it said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, also love your enemies, and even pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For God makes the sun to rise on the evil and the good, on the righteous and those that are less than righteous." Earlier this week on Tuesday, I was reading the conservative columnist David Brooks. He did a bit of psychoanalyzing. He said that Donald Trump continues to display the symptoms of narcissistic alexithymia, which is the inability to understand or describe your own internal emotions. Unable to know themselves, writes Brooks, sufferers are unable to understand, relate, or attach to other people. To prove their own existence, they hunger for endless attention from outside. Lacking internal measures of their own worth, they rely on external but insecure criteria like wealth, beauty, fame, and other people's submission to their will. I have no idea to what extent this actually applies to the New York real estate mogul, but I've seen this condition up close and personal. And Brooks points out rightly that people that are like this are bad at friendship, they're worse at love, and they're even worse still at affection. They can only actually imitate intimacy. They can see it in other people, but they can't really do it themselves. And so their marriages fail. And mostly they deploy anger and aggression. They're given to demeaning other people. But this is what's interesting. They can be very competitive. Indeed, I was surprised how incredibly successful the 2 men that I knew who had the full-blown manifestation of the disease. One was a doctor and the other was an entrepreneur. And what struck me at the time is how both of them had climbed the ladder of success. And while it's true that they built organizations around them that were somewhat tyrannical, most everybody that worked for them was willing to put up with it because they were all paid very, very well. And most of their presenting symptoms could be socially channeled in constructive ways. These guys were fighters. They were aggressive, and they were bold and willing to step out and do something that was bigger than life. And it really struck me that within the limited context of our jobs, because we have such limited expectations in our work environments, you can have this disorder and really climb up the ladder. Indeed, there's quite a few jobs, as you know, where it seems to help if you can channel aggression and anger. But it doesn't work at home. At home, they're very lonely people, even if they are surrounded by an extended cast of social people that they socialize with because they're acquainted with so many people through the success of their work. You cannot buy other people's love. You have to open yourself to other people to give and receive love. And it isn't until you get to that really intimate moment that you see the full manifestation of this disorder. Typically, and this is what I heard, their spouses threaten to leave them, which is followed by inordinate gifting, inordinate indulgence. And it works, but it doesn't work. And it works and it doesn't work. And finally, the spouse says to them, I want to love you, but you won't let me. I'm leaving because I need something more than you can give me. And it's a very sad impasse because their limits are exposed. And it's sad because we all want to love and be loved. People who were like this have a spiritual hollowness to them. The 2 men that I knew desperately wished they had a capacity to love that they just didn't have. And without it, all of their fame and their wealth and the so-called good life that they led didn't really have any spiritual meaning, because they knew other people had something they didn't. And they were in this perpetual state where they were frustrated because the intimacy that they wanted the most was actually elusive. It was horrible to see. When I saw it up close and personal, it just helped underscore for me the fullness of God's intention for us to live out of our love, live out of our grace, out of our gratitude. The spiritual life is all about touching other people. It's about empathy and compassion and understanding and healing people of the negative things that they were born into. Now, what's really real for us spiritually is making a difference in the lives of other people. What gives us the deepest satisfaction is when other people tell us that they've been grateful for something that we've done. They've been grateful for the fact that we are alive. Usually it comes in an unguarded moment when a friend or a spouse, maybe a child, will tell you that, you know what, you really helped me at a critical time. And for just a second, you wade into a deeper pool of meaning. You're glad to be alive, and you're grateful. My ethics professor, Glenn Stassen, used to say that we have the capacity to make surprising, transforming initiatives spiritually. We can make a difference and change the situation. He thought Jesus was one of those creative spiritual leaders who was able to turn the other cheek. It's not something you would expect, turning the other cheek, and it changes the situation completely, and so can we. Angela Patton runs Camp Diva in Richmond, Virginia. It's an organization that promotes girls and their fathers, recognizing how important fathers are for young girls and how much positive influence young girls can have upon their fathers. And when she asked the girls what they needed at around age 9, age 10, what they needed from their fathers, they had many answers that they gave her, but one thing they all had in common is they wanted to have a dance. And so they did. All these 9-year-old girls dressed up, and their dads put on coat and tie, and they went and had a dance together, and they had a meal together. It was a huge hit in Richmond. Lots of people wanted to be part of it, and they decided to make it an annual affair. They've been doing it for 2 or 3, 4 years now. A couple of years ago, one of the girls who was in the group was very sad. After they prompted her just a bit, she explained that her dad couldn't go to the dance because her dad was in jail. Angela had this marvelously creative response in an awkward moment. She let the girls solve their own problem. One of the girls said, well, why don't they just let him out of jail for a day? The rest of the girls explained, jail doesn't work quite like that. And file this under a child shall lead them. One of the other girls said, why don't we take the dance into the jail? Of course, most of the other girls said, what, are you crazy? They're not going to let a bunch of little 9-year-old girls into a jail to have a dance. And so Angela said to them, you know what, girls? You never know until you ask. And she wrote a letter to the sheriff of Richmond asking if they could have a dance in the local jail. And she had all these girls sign that letter with their 9-year-old cursive handwriting. The sheriff got the letter and called Angela up right away. And he said to her, listen, if there's one thing that I know, it's that our prisoners are much less likely to come back here if they have a strong relationship with their kids. Anything I can do to promote a healthy relationship between these fathers and their children, you can count me in. I'll figure out a way, and we will do this. And from there was born the dance in the jail. And I'm sure there was a lot of planning that had to be done and a lot of difficult things that had to be worked out. But Angela's group eventually got permission to put up crepe paper in the gym of the jail. They set out a punch bowl. They had a DJ. They had a caterer come in and prepare a meal. And 16 inmates traded in their orange jumpsuits. The girls called them SpongeBob suits. I love that. And the guards gave them shirts and ties. I think there were 16 inmates and 18 daughters that were able to come to the first dance. And they all came to the gym dressed in their finest. And they danced, which is simple enough. And as it turns out, probably also profound. because I never really thought about the fact that prisoners get so little physical contact from anybody, but especially from their families or loved ones, and what impact that has on them. But I suspect it is far greater than you would presume. Angela said it was the simple things. It was fathers being able to fix their daughters a plate of food, being able to pull out her chair for her, extend their hand, and ask their own daughters for a dance. She said it was so moving as she watched this normalcy go on that she noticed almost all of the guards were actually getting a little welled up watching it. Because you know what? We're all humans. We need normal touch. And Angela did another creative thing. She gave all the girls flip cams so they could record little sessions with their fathers, so that later on, when one of them was missing the other, they'd have a little recording that they could go back to and play it again and remember each other. So they were all sitting there laughing with each other, making these little videos together at their tables. Angela said she'll never forget one young girl who held that camera up to her dad and said, "Daddy, when you look at me, what do you see?" Such a simple question, but it's also a profound question, as Angela knows and I know all too well. Because when it comes time for girls to pick men that they're going to date, especially men that they think they might marry, they are profoundly guided for good and for ill by the way their father reflected back for them an image of who they are and what kind of men they deserve. All the girls laughed, they danced, they hugged, they said goodbye. The sheriff pulled the men together after all the girls left, and he put them in a circle. He realized that they needed to process what they had just been through and also help them make that transition back from being normal to being a prisoner again. All the guys sat there together thinking their own thoughts, mostly staring at the floor. One of them finally said, "You know what? This is what we're missing because of the bad decisions that we've made." I just wonder if that dance didn't get through in a way that nothing else really could. And I wonder if those daughters didn't help heal their fathers in a way that nobody else probably could. That was creative, surprising, transforming, and it's always humane. How insightful of Angela Patton to promote fathers and daughters and strengthen that relationship. How surprising the influence and the healing that daughters can have on their fathers and keep them on the higher path. How transforming the simple use of touch to remind us what's really spiritually real in our lives and bring out the humane side even of prisoners. You know what? We're all in need of redemption, and redemption keeps us humane. It's my prayer, by the way, that we'll stop looking at prisoners simply as people that deserve punishment, start seeing them as people that we need soon return to civil society and people we need to redeem. And more broadly, our world is crying out for leaders with transformative vision like that of Angela Patton and the sheriff of the city of Richmond. And we hope for people that will think outside the box and break through the gridlock and transcend the things that separate us today. And by the way, I pray for you too this week. May the Spirit of God fall fresh on you, and in the midst of the anxiety that you were going through, may you be filled with creativity to figure out a transforming initiative that you can do to change the calculus of what's going on around you. Open yourself to the Holy Spirit of God and be guided in a new way. Drive back the cynicism by doing things that are good, and keep yourself real and in touch with what's meaningful. And may God bless you and preserve what is humane in your soul. Amen.